So Prem has very kindly agreed to be our moderator. He is well, he's the founder and CEO of CEO Smart Magazine, which is a part of a group that offers online and other media knowledge sharing for CEOs in India. So he's well sort of accustomed to interviewing and moderating channels with esteemed business leaders, and we have some of our very own business leaders now with us to share some of their experiences about doing startups in India. So he's an engineer by training and transitioned into the media world in 2009. So I'll hand it over to them, and thank you very much for joining us.
Great, Rupam. Thanks for coming. Wow, good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here at Harvard Business School, and delighted very much to be moderating this panel. So I'm going to do a quick round of introductions, and then in terms of format, we'll pretty much go through the different aspects of running a business in India. We have 3 entrepreneurs from India over here, and then we also have Anurag, who runs a India-focused startup, but from New York. To my far left is Pankaj Dinodia. Pankaj is a Harvard MBA. Went back initially to India to start up Goldman's private equity business. Eventually, he set up Dinodia Capital, an investment bank. Thanks, Pankaj. To my immediate left is Anurag Gupta of Savan. He's a Bollywood guy. He runs a Bollywood music streaming service. When he starts talking, you'll know more about it. He's based in New York. He's against starting up in India. He runs his business from New York, if I can call it that. Media guys tend to hype up things a little bit, so I'll do that. To my immediate right is Jackie Stenson. She's wrapping up at Harvard College. She's the opposite of Anurag. She's going to go back to India, and she's going to run businesses, run S-Mart Global, essentially with the goal of reinventing the Kirana store in India, helping them with better supply chain, getting them access to newer products. She's actually driven a motorcycle from the suburb of Tamil Nadu to Bangalore, so she's well entrenched with doing fun stuff in India. And then to my extreme right is Sid Shah. He's a semi-Bollywood guy too. His group, Wiley's group, does interesting stuff for various brands, both personal and professional brands. He is working with Hrithik Roshan, helping him expand his brand to various merchandise and licensing options. He works with Playboy magazine as well, right? Okay, so we have a wonderful panel here. We're going to get started with, I'm going to let all panel members talk about their organizations a little bit, and if you can add to the early stage of how you started up, that would be wonderful as well. Pankaj, you want to go first?
Sure. Can everybody hear me? Yep, okay, great. Not to steal the moderator's thunder, but just want to get a sense of who's in the audience so that we can also customize some of the stuff that we talk about. So any entrepreneurs in the room? Okay. Current students, MBA students at Harvard Business School? Okay. Students from anywhere else? Undergrad in Boston? Oh, wow. Great. And then anybody here who wants to start a business in India?
Everybody does.
Everybody does. So there's a saying which goes that any industry that Harvard Business School is sending its kids to, that's the industry that people should short. So I don't know how anybody would short entrepreneurship, but it's great to have everybody here. So thanks to the organizers of the conference for having us here. Quick background about myself is that I grew up in India, came to the US when I was 17 to do my undergrad, went to the Wharton School, studied finance, joined Goldman Sachs in investment banking in New York, and then was asked in 2007 to go start a private equity business in India. 4 of us were given business cards and put on a plane and asked, hey, go build us a private equity business. When we got there, we thought, it's great, Goldman Sachs is so well known, it's going to be a walk in the park. But literally at that point of time, neither did promoters, and in India, entrepreneurs are known as promoters, neither did promoters know what it meant to take outside capital. And we certainly didn't know what it meant to work with, sort of these family-run insulated businesses and give capital to them. So that was a great learning experience for me. And then my grandfather called me one day and said that, look, you've only gone to a big school and you work at big companies. We run a teeny tiny accounting business based out of New Delhi. Why don't you come and spend a year working here before you go back to business school in the US and see if you like what we do, and then maybe there could be some value once you graduate. So I did that. That was a very smart decision in my life, and I'm very grateful to my grandfather. My family's been in the accounting and tax business for 65 years. They run this traditional accounting firm called SR Dinodia and Company. So mostly family businesses, between $10 million of revenue to about $200 million of revenue size, all old school industries, manufacturing, auto, healthcare, a lot of those kind of businesses, which are now going to the second, third generation. So I spent a year trying to develop a M&A advisory business within that. But the tax and accounting practice of the family firm was so strong that it was difficult to do that. So I left and came to HBS, did my MBA in 2011. I graduated from here, and then moved back to India to set up Dinodia Capital Advisors. That's the firm I currently run. It is basically positioned to be a boutique investment bank. But what we are today is a hybrid between a consulting firm and an investment bank. The question that Prem asked us was, what was it like when you first started? So I thought, I'd gone to Wharton, Goldman Sachs, Harvard. It's going to be easy to develop this business. Great brands, good resume, and whatnot. It's going to be easy to get clients and all of that. I moved back. I asked my father, where am I going to sit in the fancy offices that they have in New Delhi? And he told me, unfortunately, I was not going to be sitting in his office. And they have this old office that they use as a warehouse that was going to be converted into my office. So I said, oh, fantastic. Where is it? So I went to see it. It was over a bootlegger's, it was in Connaught Place in the heart of the city, but over a bootlegger's shop. The elevator in the building did not work. And it was about 4 flights of stairs to get up to the office. It was about 800 square feet, so it was a nice space. It wasn't small. But as soon as I walked in, I couldn't stop coughing. It was completely infested with termites, files. I mean, you could imagine your worst nightmare, and that came true. So they said, well, this is your office. Please fix it and start bringing in some revenue. We'll have the first board meeting from the family side in about 3 months, and let's talk about how you plan to build this business. So that was a great start. So first thing I did was clean up that room, put internet, hired a bunch of people to clean it up and whatnot. So that's where we really started from. From there, 2.5 years later, what we do today is we typically advise businesses between $10 million of revenue and 100 million. So a lot of them are inherited from the parent company. And what we do is we professionalize these businesses and help them either to raise capital or to do mergers and acquisitions, or to really professionalize and grow these businesses, especially if there are issues around transformation around generations, father giving over the business to the son, some dynamic which would then shape a transaction in terms of a capital raise and whatnot. So it's been an interesting journey. I'll talk more about it, but I'll pass it now to Anurag.
My name is Anurag Gupta. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
And how many of you use Saban? Rest of them, hopefully, we'll try them again. So it's kind of not as complex a journey as Pankaj is, but we set out to create something useful. And when we looked around what was not very useful currently for Indians, we in our own life we had experienced tremendous amount of frustration trying to just find Indian songs without having to go through 3 ads, something download, something all this. And also in addition to that, we thought at that time, being technologists now, that search was not being taken care of. So that was the genesis of the idea that finally became Saban. We launched the company around a year later. We were on moonlighting at the time. 1 more year later, we got acquired by Saban, which became the product for Saban. So, and I've been around for 4 years now, leading the technology team and a little bit of the product team.
Thanks, Anurag. Jackie, do you want to?
Okay, we're recording. Great. So, hi everyone, you can all hear me. So my name is Jackie, thanks for coming today. I did not want to be an entrepreneur. That was never something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a ninja for a little while, and then I realized that that wasn't actually a profession, or so I wasn't informed enough to know. But I actually stumbled into being an entrepreneur for a company. So I did my undergrad here at Harvard, studied mechanical engineering, got really disillusioned by all the different types of technologies that people were working on that were either destroying the environment or destroying cultures or not helping people. So I became really interested in technologies that actually help people and improve people's lives. Things like low-cost solar lanterns, water filters, fuel-efficient cook stoves, agricultural tools. You name it, I was interested in those types of technologies. And after my undergrad, I was very lucky, I got a fellowship from Harvard, and they basically gave me a ridiculous amount of money to hitchhike my way from Ethiopia to South Africa overland working with several different types of technologies. So I worked with water pumps, I worked with plastics recycling, I worked with bicycle-powered machines and agricultural tools, and I was trying to figure out on this journey which of these technologies I ultimately wanted to work on as an engineer. And I realized none. What I actually realized is that there were hundreds of technologies that I knew that existed, but never once in all of my travels overland, and I went through a lot of small villages, did I ever stumble upon anyone using these technologies or benefiting from these technologies. So I became really interested in the whole idea of technology dissemination, went back, did my master's in Cambridge on the idea of how do you get products to people. And then when I finished my master's, I thought, well, now I'll go find a company that's working exclusively on the distribution of socially impactful technologies. And then I realized that there aren't any. And so that's how I ended up starting S-Mart. My co-founder, Diana, has a very similar story to me, except all of her research and all of her experience was in southern India, which is how we ended up there over in East Africa. That and a couple other reasons that I can go into later. But we ended up in southern India, so our team is all based in Bangalore, we work in Tamil Nadu, and basically we tried to address the technology distribution problem by connecting a catalog of products, and right now we have 45 different products, to places where people already shop. So their local mom and pop retail shop, kirana shops is what they're known by in many parts of India, Malige shops in Tamil Nadu, many different names. And so that's what S-Mart does. Right now we have 4 distribution centers in Tamil Nadu, and we have like 30 different employees who go around and they drive on motorbikes to local mom and pop shops and bring our catalog of products and do the distribution. So we're about 2 years old in terms of the company, but technology dissemination is a problem that I've been passionate about and researching for probably upwards of 8 or 9 years.
What up, Harvard? How you guys doing? So my name is Sid Shah. I run a company called the Wild East Group. It's, just to summarize what the company does is we look at a brand asset and we figure out how we can grow its value. So we work with clients across celebrity, corporate, lifestyle, and figure out how we can make them more money essentially by creating new business for them. So I work with Hrithik Roshan, I work with Playboy, I work with Times of India, and a bunch of other brands. Just to give an example of how that works is we'll take a look at Playboy and say, look, how can we create a new business for them? So when you think about Playboy, you think about sex, you think about aspiration, you think about lifestyle. And what we do is we create products that have those similar attributes. So we're taking them into alcohol, like Playboy vodka. We're taking them into Viagra. We're taking them into, which is, makes sense. We're taking them into a variety of other products like that. So it's really fun. I get to be an entrepreneur for my clients, so I get to create new business for them. I started this company because I was doing this in the US for a while, structuring deals for Britney Spears and Halle Berry and Clorox and a lot of these brands. And I saw that, when I was doing my MBA, I saw that nobody was doing this in India. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna go to India, do this, make a lot of money, sell the company, move back to LA, and get a beach house. That was my plan. I'm still in India. So, I will tell you, what I think I can talk to you about is the fundraising process. I can talk to you about kind of some of the business planning. I can talk to you about how, what the pros and cons are of starting a business in India. What I think, what kind of outlook you should look at before you make the plunge. Because these are things I wish I'd kind of known before I decided to start a business in India. And happy to answer any questions after the session as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. Sid, thanks. We'll have a chat later. I can help you with the Playboy stuff. Great. Okay. So moving on to the serious part of the panel discussion, right? What we're going to try to figure out here, and audience can feel free to chip in between. We don't have to wait till the end to get questions. Essentially, the plan we have in mind is to talk about the different metrics, the different factors that shape up an entrepreneurship ecosystem in India. We're going to talk about fundraising, availability of talent, availability of mentorship, availability of growth capital after the early phase, all of that, right? So I think fundraising is the most important aspect of the whole thing. So let's get started with fundraising. Any other points you guys want to talk about with respect to the entrepreneurship ecosystem in India? Let's get the audience involved right away so that we know what you guys are interested in.
If you guys could talk about the political interference by starting
Okay.
business.
Sure.
Scaling really.
Okay. Scaling, political interference, seed capital,
Marketing.
marketing, talent. Okay, all of that, right? Entrepreneurship in India is really tough.
All the classes you took in your first year at HBS.
There's also all of the legal compliance issues
Okay.
and practical issues like renting an office, particularly for foreign companies or hiring people in India for foreign companies.
Sure. I don't know if all of us are equipped to answer all of those questions, but we'll try. Okay. Sure, why not?
And it's barriers to entry. So how easy is it to just jump on a plane like Sid said, just go to India and start?
Don't do it.
All right.
Deciding whether to take the plunge when you graduate with a student loan.
The student law. Okay.
Does foreign education help in starting business in India, right? I mean, all of your
Education doesn't help. It's not
What's the cultural barriers basically like moving to India?
I think the challenges of registering a company abroad and in India while doing business in India.
Cool. Perfect. Okay. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with Pankaj a little bit because he runs an investment bank. Let's talk about access to capital, both at the seed stage as well as both venture capital, private equity, all forms of growth capital. Pankaj, you want to get started?
Sure. So the lines between private equity, venture capital, seed, angel are not as clear as they are in the US, in India, unfortunately. So you will see Sequoia, which does early stage and growth equity investing in the US, go after the same deals as KKR would in India, which would never happen. They would not even be in the same block or the radius, 2-mile radius of each other here in the US. Versus in India, and the reason why I wanted to start off by saying that is capital is not really the issue in India. There are enough capital providers. There are about 250 active GPs that play in the Indian market. When I moved in 2007, people had never heard of KKR. If you said KKR, they thought it was a Kolkata Knight Riders. Oh my God, you were with KKR yesterday? So, obviously the ecosystem has evolved quite a lot. Not to say it's like a Silicon Valley or even Israel for that matter. But dearth of capital is certainly not an issue. So anybody who's raised capital here in the audience, was it easy for you to raise capital for your business?
No.
Did you raise it in the US?
No.
Where did you raise it?
In Bangalore.
In Bangalore. Okay. Anybody raise capital here in the US? Was it easy for you to raise capital here?
Fairly easy.
Fairly easy. Okay. So there has to be a difference in terms of a well-established ecosystem with a lot of capital providers who've been doing it for a very long time. If you think about private equity, it's a 10-year-old industry, if that, in India. Venture capitalists, I would say, there are people who've been, rich families who've been doing venture deals for a long period of time. But it is still an emerging kind of play. And frankly, the US also went through its fair share of pain in the beginning. There were lots of people who didn't know how to do private equity or venture capital or seed deals, lost a lot of money, people got burned, and then the people who were left behind were the sophisticated investors who ended up creating the returns and charging the 2 and 20 and going on to become the KKRs and the Sequoias and the Blackstones of the world. India is no different. So people have made mistakes. People often ask me, there is no example of a private equity firm who's made money in India. Look at Chris Capital. Read about Ashish Dhawan. Read about ICICI Ventures. Read about Sequoia Capital. Read about the Westbridge guys. There are enough examples of private equity and venture guys who've made successful exits and have created a lot of value, both for their investee companies as well as for their funds. So lack of capital is not an issue in my mind. It is about finding the right person. If you're only going after valuation, India is certainly not the market. As Indians, we are very cagey about leaving value on the table. We all love to negotiate, whether you learned it from your mom who went to buy vegetables in the morning, or whether you were negotiating, people even negotiate at restaurants. It's ridiculous what they do. So, it's just a part of our DNA. So valuations are a challenge. Exits, yes, I agree, have been challenging, but successful companies are able to raise capital here, India, Jordan, Lebanon, whatnot. So capital is really not a problem. It is the execution which is the challenge. Retention of people, attracting a lot of the questions that were asked around marketing, all of that kind of stuff, and we'll get into it. But my word for capital, it's easy. Call me, I'll help you find the right investors, and at least connect you. If you went to Harvard Business School, there is a great ecosystem of investors that work in India and have gone to school here and are very willing to help. Literally, you pick up the phone or you call them, they'll have that conversation. They may not give you money, but at least they'll put you in the right direction if they can't give you capital.
Wonderful. Anybody else wants to chip in? Jackie, you raised some money recently, right?
So I disagree with parts of that, and I think it's just could be because of the industry that we're in. We tend to fall more in the socially impactful impact investing space. I cannot raise money in India. There's just no way that we would have been able to do it. People are too risk adverse. And for our type of business, which is a distribution focused business, we don't fit into anybody's standard buckets. So we're not specifically like a livelihoods business or an energy business or something else. And people are just way, way, way too risk adverse. And I don't trust any of the impact investors there. Sorry if you're in the audience. So we raise money from the States, and we did a friends and family round. But I think that it really also depends on your industry. I found that if you're in the IT space or if you're in a software space, it's going to be significantly easier than if you're doing an old-fashioned, moving around products on motorbikes distribution business that does not look nearly as attractive as something that's going to get you a quick exit. So it really does also depend on your space.
So, if you look at the last 3 years in India, you could say there's probably about 900 companies that get started a year in the startup world. About 400 of them incorporate, and about 10 to 20% of those kind of fail. And about 150 companies a year get seed funding. And so those are the statistics that you're dealing with. Like Pankaj said, it's a growing ecosystem. I agree with Jackie. I think capital is very hard to get. Big team is right. You have to do a lot of networking. The checks you get are small. If you are doing digital, if you're doing mobile, if you're doing education, it's probably much easier. You have to show traction. You're not having situations where you're having like 10 companies giving you term sheets. Instead, you have 10 companies who will say, let's invest in together, right? So if you're trying to raise money for your company, I would strongly suggest raising money outside of India if you can, because it's significantly easier. I did my first round half in India and half in the US. My US kind of investors gave me money in 3 weeks. My India investors gave me money after 6 months. And that's kind of, that's the game that you're playing. It does take a lot longer, I think. So, I will be calling Pankaj after this meeting to see if he can give me this easy money he's talking about.
Can I get a meeting with Katrina K?
I would side with Sid and Jackie a little bit more. Just remember, as entrepreneur, your job does not end at raising money. 50% of your time is going into raising the next round after you raise the previous one. You have that much less time to actually build the business. So just something to keep in mind, because the check sizes are definitely small. And that's the reason we as a company shied away from a lot of Indian investors, because check sizes do not make sense to us if we are running a full-fledged company. So.
Wonderful, thanks guys. With respect to the seed capital ecosystem in India, right? So like Pankaj mentioned, there's HBS Angels, Ravi Gururaj and a few other people run it. If you're a Harvard MBA, it's a great place to start. I think in terms of seed fund, there's enough. In terms of Series A, there's a reasonable number of players operating in India as well. I think the challenge is, the space between the seed round and the Series A round, I think. But if you're a HBS guy, mail Ravi Gururaj on LinkedIn, tell him Prem from the Smart CEO told you to get in touch.
A lot of you are students, I think. You raised your hands. Milk your universities for money. They're like the best source of money. That's how we got so much of our seed funding. Was like every university, we got one person from like every university on our team. But do it now. It's going to be a lot harder when you leave.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so moving on to the second part, right? So like Anurag rightly mentioned, it's about running the business, right? Capital is only the first step. In terms of, so let's take access to mentorship, access to talent together, and let's get experiences. Let's start with Sid. I don't know if you had a mentor, structured mentor, all of that, but take us through the early stage in terms of setting up your initial team.
That's still an ongoing process. Talent is probably one of the most difficult things to find in India, whether you're looking agency model like mine, tech, whatever it is, it took me probably 3 years to build my management. And my management team is very small. And that the same thing happens for tech resources. So talent is really tough. That's, if you have the right team, you can really kill it really fast. But to build that right team takes a lot of time, and you need money. And that goes back to fundraising, right? The one thing I realized about entrepreneurship is that in the U.S., I believe it's probably like a 5-year game where you have consistency and you're profitable. And that, it takes that kind of long if you're not like part of that 1% of TechCrunch, But in India, for sure, it doesn't matter what industry, and I believe it's a 10-year game. And so when you're thinking about your plan in India, you got to be ready to think, okay, am I ready for a 10-year investment in my plan? And are the returns of that investment going to, be what I'm worth, right? So, resources is really difficult. You have to, you should really spend some time, I think, before you start your business to go to India and meet a lot of people, meet angel investors, meet potential peers of yours, meet other companies that might be in a similar space, to kind of get a feel of how they hired or what challenges they went through, because that's the only way. Don't go there with an idea. Do not go there with an idea, because you'll get burned so fast. Go there with an idea, with a plan of execution, because that's what separates the people who make it and the people who don't. The execution 100%.
Anybody else wants to chip in terms of building a team? Did you built your whole team in the US, right? Or
Half of it is in the US.
Okay.
So yeah, one quick thing on that is, I disagree a little bit with Sid on the talent part. I think there is immense amount of talent, just not talent that is experienced enough. So if you were looking for 10-year experience, extraordinarily talented people, there are very few people, because you probably by that time you learn to operate at a very high end in whatever the level, whatever the expertise is. So we found it incredibly easy. Once we had the proper, I'm running engineering. So once we got the director of engineering figured out, and that was one of the founding engineers of the company, he moved back to Mumbai. Once he was there, it is incredibly easy for him to hire. Maybe it has something to do with because we have a consumer brand, and people kind of can easily identify with music, brand, and some of the nice things that we throw on the website, etc. Maybe that was maybe easy. But I think we went about that methodically, and we went to the right colleges. We were connected to some of those colleges. We went to the right colleges, and up the game. Hired very conservatively, but hired very good talent. And so, surprisingly, talent has not been the biggest challenge for us, especially in the tech field. Non-tech field, humongous challenge. The BD, the sales, the operations, the HR, etc. is very, very hard. So if you just hold on to anybody smart that you find and give them 3 more things that they want, give them more, but just hold on. That will be my opinion.
Yeah, just to add to that, like you mentioned on the tail end, it's the retention part of talent is key. And that is what a lot of good companies in India struggle with. And fundamentally in the US, the way it's done is through stock options and golden handcuffs and all these kind of things. In India, people don't respond to those things yet because just there's lack of information and knowledge. Nobody knows how these options are priced, when they're going to actually kind of vest, what if there will be an exit. And there has been a lot of precedence in terms of the owners, especially a lot of family businesses, keeping a lot of the big equity for themselves. And even if they do give equity, who knows what that's really worth in a few years, right? If that will actually be able to encash that or not. So a lot of these structures that are used to retain talent in the US just don't work in India. So that is, it's still an early game in that sense.
So I think for us, talent, we don't hire anybody in the software scene, and that does make it a little bit challenging. You're finding salespeople and you're trying to incentivize them to stay. And my 2 biggest pieces of advice for hiring talent is passion and ownership. So we will opt for people that are really passionate about what we're doing over people that seem to be better at skills but don't actually care, because they're the ones that will stay. And then the second piece is ownership. We give all of our employees, we're employing people in villages, we're employing people straight out of college, really young people, and we give them a lot of autonomy and a lot of ownership. And that's what's actually kept people in our company, is that they have so much ability to shape what the company is going to look like, and they really appreciate that, because I think in very traditional like hierarchical structures, they don't get that. And those two things I think have been the only things that have helped us retain talent. But I think as some people here highlighted, finding those people to begin with is like one of the hardest things that we do.
Excuse me, I think you need to clarify ownership as you just used the term and as Pankaj used the term. He's talking about equity ownership, and I think you're talking about conceptual.
Sorry, I'm talking about I'm not talking about ownership as Pankaj did in terms of owning parts of the company. I'm talking about ownership in the sense of that they take ownership over the actions that they do, and that they have the ability to say, come to the higher level management and say, hey, we really would like such and such to happen in the company. Can you make that happen? So they feel empowered to make some of those decisions themselves. But yes, not actually any sort of equity ownership. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, let's talk a little bit about scaling up, and we'll probably get the different panelists involved, and we could probably use some anecdotes from your own business to talk about the scaling up process. So you want to go first? Tell us what you do for Hrithik Roshan. Tell us how you win business.
Yeah. Okay. So scaling up again is it's a function of everything else. Now, the one thing that you do have to keep in mind, and this is the reality on the ground, is that everything in India does take 2 to 10 times longer. And it doesn't matter, how smart you are, how motivated you are, how enthusiastic you are. So you have to understand that, right? So scaling up, you have to always plan to scale, but you also have to realize that sometimes scaling takes time. Okay, and so, how do you ensure business sustainability? Dealing with the kind of slow business effects of India. Okay. Now for me, it was a completely new business model that we were introducing into the country. So my business development approach was, to acquire Hrithik as a client took me almost 2 years, right? But now, everything, because we're actually doing very interesting things for a lot of brands, my business development acquisition is like 3 to 6 months. So it took me like 6 months to get Playboy. It took me 3 months to get Times of India. And so now it's happening much faster, but I've already invested 4 years in the game. And now I'm starting to see a lot of those returns. So that's kind of what I was talking about. It's like, it will take time. It takes a lot of time to kind of build your reputation so that people know you're a serious dude. It takes time for people to see results. A lot of people don't like taking risks, right? It's a very risk-averse culture. And so if you show results with one brand or client, and then you take that to somebody else, and they're much more excited to work with you, right? And so that whole process takes a lot of time. And that's one part of it. The second part of it is, when you're doing any kind of services business, the one thing I've realized, it's a very, for lack of better words, like a committee-led decision process, right? If you're not going to the top, it's not getting done. So it doesn't matter how big the company is. If you're dealing with Vijay Mallya at Kingfisher, you're dealing with Samir Jain at the Times Group, whatever, you got to deal with those guys initially to get working with them, and then you start working with their people. So think about how much time you really takes to get to some of these top guys, right? It's not easy, and so that also adds to the time to scale as well, because that's how you get the big accounts and the big clients. On the tech business, it's a totally different model, which I can't really speak about.
Sorry, I have a follow-up question first. Like the statements, like we are saying that it takes 3 weeks in US to get an investor. It takes 6 months in India. It takes, like you're comparing the stats.
Yeah.
They're more like a factual statement.
Yeah.
Like, what are the reasons behind why it's happening? Because as a entrepreneur, like if I want to start, this can be discouraging for
Sure. No, I don't mean to discourage, because the opportunity is massive, right?
Yeah.
But I do want to make sure you guys know the reality on the ground. The reason why it takes longer is a lot of reasons. Number one, like Pankaj mentioned, the ecosystem is still developing, right? In the US, you have people who exited companies 10 years ago who are billionaires who are throwing money back into the ecosystem. Right now, we're seeing, like over the last 3 or 4 years, those exits and those people kind of reinvesting a little bit, right? And so the ecosystem itself is new, right? So the kind of investments and ticket size that people make are much smaller. And they need to see traction before they keep on throwing money in, right? That traction is happening, but again, it's really slow. You're seeing maybe about 20 to 30 exits a year in tech, hardware, mobile right now. That's not a lot. If you have, like you said, 250 GPs, you have probably 80 accelerators and angel funds who are all investing. Right now, if you're only getting 20 or 30 exits a year with all these people, they're not, they could probably throw their money in gold and real estate and make much more money, right? And so, that kind of ability to keep on pumping money back in the ecosystem is happening, but it's just slow. And that's what you just have to deal with. You know, you have to have the passion and the endurance to say, okay, I understand this is the reality, but I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna go, you know, balls against the wall and make this thing happen. You know, that's kind of why I say that.
Pankaj, do you want to add to that? I have beyond what you want to talk about, right? In terms of scaling up, right? So there's people. You have to scale up people. You have got to scale up infrastructure. You got to scale up. You need access to capital. So if you can add some structure to the scaling up process in India based on some of your experience with your own clients, that will be wonderful.
I think putting down good foundations and structure right at the beginning or inception of a business is key to scaling it anywhere in the world. You know, in India, there is an added layer of complexity because my father is a tax lawyer. He has to read tax laws that come out every evening in India because they change every day. So when he goes to court the next morning, if he didn't read the tax law that came out last evening, he can argue a case and just lose it on the fact that something which had come out yesterday didn't make it to his desk. So that's the speed and the level of complexity that gets added to doing business in India. The laws change very quickly, sometimes in your favor, sometimes against you. Even in terms of an accounting, compliance kind of standpoint, India is a very, very legally, accounting-wise and tax-wise a complicated place to do business. It's not very expensive to hire a good, this is not a plug for my dad's firm at all, but you know, we were very lucky to have them as advisors to us in the beginning. It took us about 3 weeks to incorporate our business and go through a lot of the compliance stuff. The cost of doing all of that was about 2 lakh of rupees, which is, you know, maybe $3,000. That money was very well spent, you know, because if you don't lay the foundation in terms of your accounting structure, in terms of your audit, in terms of company secretarial stuff, as you start scaling the business, a lot of these things can start pulling you in different directions, and that's the last thing you want to worry about when you're trying to add talent, raise capital. Oh, why are these tax guys after me? Or why is this compliance issue now bothering me and whatnot? So if you are trying to build a business in India, hire a good lawyer, accountant, banker, whoever you trust. And fundamentally, to add to that point that you raised about why it takes 6 months, frankly, it's about trust. As Indians, it takes us a while to trust people. Whether it's somebody you want to do business with, somebody you want to marry, somebody you want to, you know, date for example, even. So it's just, that's who our DNA is. And there have been enough cases of people having lost a lot of money in India. And that's the reason why it takes trust. When we were investors, it took us at least 2 quarters of seeing earnings. If you said that you were going to scale and do this for 1 quarter and then do this in the next quarter, we actually wanted to see 6 months worth of data before we put our money where our mouth is. So that's the nature of the ball game in India. So in terms of structure, you know, do it earlier rather than later. It's not that expensive.
So I guess we've all taken a little, you know, a negative stance or rather a slower stance of entrepreneurship in India, right? So let's talk about some of the advantages of running a business in India, advantages of starting up in India. And Madhukar, you want to add something?
On the flip side, if you see, you know, a lot of people have made a lot of money in the last 10 years, especially the real estate guys, different guys. So we should be looking at those who get there on the money or nothing to lose. There has been a big gambling tradition in India. It's gambling. So they would mind investing in a there's a piece. There's a lot of system. So we should look at a middle size India and will be, you know, invested in these kind of businesses.
That's very true. I think if you look at Mumbai Angels,
can you repeat that?
Angels,
Can you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, the question is about, essentially I think what Madhukar is getting at is we need a larger pool of angel investors in India, and what he's suggesting is there are people who have made money in sectors that are not necessarily entrepreneurial. So there are people who have made money in liquor, in real estate, whereas, you know, startups are getting started in the tech field, in mobile, in internet and all that. So what he's suggesting is that we should somehow convince people who have made a ton of money in old economy sectors, also in cash, to kind of, you know, get them into the angel investing process. It actually happens quite a lot in the US. If you look at Mumbai Angels, Chennai Angels, a few other India Angel Network, you can see that there are a few real estate guys coming on board to become angel investors. You want to add something?
Yeah, hi, I'm with Lloyd, actually based out in Toronto. So to this point, you know, about real estate value, etc., we get pitched a lot. I do a lot of work in India.
Okay.
So the people who are in cash want to stay in cash. You know, they're not going to move stuff in the other direction, then it goes to the hassle of declaring it and acting where you get it wrong, right? So you got to be careful. The point about raising money, because a lot of people from India and Indian companies come to me to see how we can raise money up in Canada, the US. The first thing that investors here will ask you is, who in India has invested in this thing? Okay, if you don't have money invested in India in that business, you do not have the credibility, unless it's friends and family or the HBS alumni or whatever, right? So that's just
some kind of credibility.
Yeah, that's very, very important. And I'm going to make a plug for Canada. So there is, and there may be something like this in the US as well. There is a Angel VC entrepreneurial visa that's available for people who are starting out businesses. If you can get angels or VCs in Canada to invest, the federal government will actually fast track you to permanent residency, etc., help connect you, as well as help you set up business with the incubators. And they're working very strongly with incubators in Chandigarh and Delhi, etc., to try and put the Indian and the Canadian VCs, etc., together. So that's something for people here to consider.
Sure, thanks. Okay, let's quickly get all panelists involved in this question, right? What are the advantages of doing business in India? You want to go first?
Market size, untapped, huge market size. Lot of investors from the West, Valley and whatnot, are even now very bullish on it. And really untapped. The competition is low grade. Yes, the speed is slow, but the competition is low grade. So you can attract talent, you can run a business, you can make it successful. You just have to be patient.
I think fundamentally you have to think about what is your competitive advantage of having a company based in India, right? Unless you can define what your value proposition is and why your business needs to be in India to yourself and to your friends and family and peers. Don't just do it for the love of the country and then cry about I'm not being able to raise capital and whatnot. Take a step back and think about it. Is this a business that is actually feasible in India or not? So in terms of advantages, having a strong support system is key. The road to entrepreneurship is very, very lonely, and the more successful you get and the higher you get, the steeper the fall becomes, and the chances of failing also increase rather. So think about it's often very helpful to have a family support system if you have that in India. Their connectivity, their ability to introduce you to folks, a very strong alumni network which India does have. 1,100 HBS alumni across India, literally across every sector that you can imagine. When I moved back, I wanted to get an appointment with Anand Mahindra. I picked up the phone and I called up a couple of friends. I got his assistant's email address, wrote him an email. The gentleman actually gave me an hour. Wanted an appointment with Mr. Adi Godrej, I got it. I wanted an appointment with Mr. Ratan Tata, I got it. Just the access that you have having gone to this school is tremendous. Now, whether they're going to give you money or not, that depends on your business. But in terms of access to all these people, in addition to the market size, it is absolutely fantastic. Try getting an appointment with some of those kind of people here in the US. I promise you, it's going to be very challenging. In terms of the opportunity set, we are in this business of advising a lot of US companies look at acquisitions in India. Just to give you some stats, the healthcare industry in India, for example, is about $90 billion in aggregate. For 1.2 billion people, $90 billion. To give you an example, in the US, with let's say a population of 300 million, it's about 17 trillion. Retail in India is about 500 billion. I don't even want to comment on how big it is in the US. So, IT services, IT and IT services, which is one of the largest and most successful industry that you hear about, it's only a $100 billion industry in India. So just the size of these are so nascent and so small that if you are able to crack the code and start a good business, whether you're taking money from families or from venture capitalists or from seed investors, the opportunity to really create some value is huge. But do it for the right reason. Just don't do it because, I'm graduating from HBS and my family lives in India, so I'm going to move there and try to raise some capital. I promise you'll be disappointed and you'll move back here and struggle to find a job after that. So find the right. I have enough friends who complain about it, right? And when I moved back, I complained about a lot of things. And somebody said, well, if you stop complaining and fix it, the onus lies on all of us. If there is a lack of ecosystems, we are the ones who have to develop it. So I joined something called TIE, which is the Indus Entrepreneur. And that ecosystem in India is so well developed, it is amazing. You can literally, once you get plugged into that circuit, whether it's questions around fundraising, whether it's questions around how to scale my business, how do I get access to mentors, how do I get access to talent. These are people who built and scaled successful businesses. It's like Sanjeev Bikhchandani, Deep Kalra, a lot of them who've gone on to become successful investors. They will actually take the time and effort and pain to mentor you, which I can't vouch for many other countries where people like that would actually take out the time in the day to do that for you. So there are lots of advantages of doing business.
Jackie, you want to add?
So I think for what we're doing, India made a lot of sense, both for the potential of the market size, but also the potential for impact, which is something that is important to us. So we believe that the best way to get more life-improving products into actually reach end users is through already existing retail shops. And in India, until very recently, until the laws were changed, the local retail shop network was very much so protected and is still very protected at the local government level. And so for the, Pankaj just mentioned that Indian retail is about a $500 billion market. About 90% of that happens in the local mom and pop shops. So for us, that was an incredible attraction in terms of the market size. For also, we deal with many, many different types of products. We have 45 SKUs in our catalog, and if we were to work elsewhere in the world, we would have to be importing in containers of these products, which is just terribly difficult, and importing anything into anywhere is often very corrupt. And so in India, it makes that's a huge advantage, is that we can source so many things locally. And I just think that the potential for impact throughout the country is much greater than if you were to start in a much smaller country.
India for me was a very, very personal reason. I'm always high burn, high risk, high reward. And for me, India is a risk, but the opportunity is massive if you find the right niche and you can figure out how to get in there and capitalize on it. It is a really big opportunity. And that, in fact, the whole region is right now. So if you go, you land in Bombay or Delhi, I mean, the energy that is there right now is insane. I mean, I complain about India on a daily basis. If I look back, no, I do. I mean, you almost do. You can't help it. I grew up here in the U.S., so it's you have that, right? But if I look back at the last 4 years, I see what's happening there. The airports are better than anywhere else in the world, right? There's monorails being built. Like, you're seeing this developing country change its infrastructure, overnight, right? And I'm seeing that at kind of like a macro level over 4 years, right? And so that to me is, I'm there definitely at the ground level, and I feel like if I keep on sticking through this, I'm going to be set up for major, major success. And so that's why I'm betting on India. If you just look at the stats, I don't know if you guys have read that Kleiner-Perkins report from 2013. Just Google it, download it. It's insane. It basically just tells you why all the growth is out there. You'll feel that when you go out there, right? You have 800 million phones in India. You have 150 million people online. You have only 20 million people shopping on e-commerce. 20 million people. Imagine if that doubles and triples, right? Think about what that brings to the table. That's immense opportunity. I think all the statistics, all the energy, all the kind of money is moving in that direction. But you have to have stamina to deal with it. And that's the key.
Wonderful, guys. Yeah, let's get some questions from the audience. You want to go first?
Yes. This has been incredibly valuable, and in terms of bringing things current, early 2014. And I'm going to make a short statement that I think is going to be very valuable. I've been involved in India for almost 20 years. A lot of scars, a lot of merit badges, involved with the Tata Group. I found a company recently, and I'm now heading their North American operations, called Sonomas 4, that specializes in market entry into India. Does all of this financial entry stuff, the legal stuff, feasibility studies, finding distributors, finding partners. Already the company has launched 200 organizations into India, MIT, Unilever, TJ Maxx, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And so we're very interested in working with large and small companies and dealing with a lot of the problems that we just heard about.
Okay, thank you. You want to go?
So I have one question for you, Sid, and another for you, Jackie. Sid, over the period of time, have you ever felt that, okay, I need to back up, I need to go back? And if not, then why? Or if yes, that night, what made you stop?
Yeah.
And let me also ask the question again. Jackie, you briefly mentioned your disgust with impact investors. Can you elaborate on that?
So entrepreneurship in general is not India. It's a roller coaster, up and down every single day. Some days you're the happiest guy in the world. Some days you're just like, what am I doing with my life? Okay, and that is somehow a little bit exponentially compounded in India for me personally. But you know, no, it just is. That's a separate conversation. Anyway, but at the end of the day, you choose to be an entrepreneur because you believe in yourself, right? And I believe in myself. I believe in what I'm doing, and I see results happening. Although slower than I expected, I see it happening, and that's kind of where the passion and the drive come, because I want to make sure I succeed. So at the end of the day, it's a very personal thing. And you have to find it in yourself, and you have to be tested, and it's about character, and it's about endurance, and it's about support from your family and your friends, and your investors and your advisors. And if you have all of that, and you keep you have your eye on the prize, then that is like half of what you need to get there. And the other half is just, I don't know, just craziness, I guess. Yeah.
Just to add on a little bit of that, I think the passion is really what keeps you going, because like being a CEO or a founder is not glorious at all. You end up picking up so much of the slack that other people don't want to do, and so it is really like that passion that sort of keeps you going, even though you spend every other day complaining about how awful it is. In answer to your question about impact investors, we have a little bit of a unique business in that we don't fit into your traditional impact investing buckets. So we're not, and we don't focus on energy products only, we don't focus on healthcare, we don't focus on education. We are very explicitly technology agnostic, and we very explicitly pitch distribution as the end in and of itself, and not just the means to another end. We believe that the problem is a supply chain one, and that's the one we're most passionate about. Impact investors have lots of little buckets, and they love to fill them. And even though they say that, like the ones that I've spoken to at least, I apologize if you are an impact investor in the room and you are different. I would love to know where you exist. But every investor and foundation, for that matter, all say that like distribution is what ultimately gets all these products out there, and that no one puts their money where their mouth is, because their money from the donors all has to go towards energy products or healthcare or something like that. So from what I've seen from impact investors, they all love talking to me and finding out about how we do distribution and figuring out as many details about my model as humanly possible, and then they go and like use that for their other products. So I don't
I think my initial question about the advantage of registering your company outside of India and still doing business in India, and a follow-up question to that is, if you're stepping into any other industry apart from e-commerce dealing with electronics or daily consumer durables, and you're going into real estate, for example, it's really, really difficult to get funding. I know it firsthand, so I'm saying it quite openly. In Bangalore, it's absolutely horrible, and I left the country, so pretty much you would probably be led to something like that in terms of first from getting funding to jumping through all the hoops and hurdles of moving from one sector to another. Just as a simple example, electronics and IT is just more relied on from an investor point of view, as opposed to stepping into, say, real estate or farming. And this is not something only I have faced, but also Drip Tech is a startup that's come out of Carnegie Mellon that's set up in Gurgaon now, and it's absolute hell. The things that you need to go through in another industry is much more difficult as compared to IT. So when you say funding is available openly, yes it is. I agree. It was very easy for me to get seeded and with angels and VCs for an e-commerce venture, but it's really, really difficult when you step out of that into another genre. So again, two questions: international registration and this really good one.
Pankaj, do you want to take that?
Actually, I don't know if I'm in a position to comment on international registration versus domestic. Incorporate where you think you will have the best access to advisors and in terms of the legal and accounting structure, right? So it's as simple as that.
Anurag did something about registering.
So let me answer your second question, right? We've covered a lot of companies that where entrepreneurs have often jumped sectors. I think VC, venture capital private equity, is for non-capital intensive businesses in India, right? So that's essentially the name of the game. You go to the US market, there is virtually, it's the same in the US as well, right? So I don't think it's a fair comment to make that there's no angel investment available for real estate in India, right? They're all fundamentally capital intensive sectors. You've got to raise money from friends and family, right? Registration, I don't know. Okay.
So we have a US entity and an Indian entity. Long story short, if you don't need a US entity, don't do it with an Indian entity. I made friends with a very nice lady in the Indian consulate in New York who helped me sort out all the paperwork, but it took months and months and months, and it takes forever to open anything in India when you have a US company involved. We needed to for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not Indian, obviously, in case you guys didn't figure that out already. So it does make it a little bit easier for visa purposes for me, things like that. And just because we are more of a capital-intensive company, we're doing, on-the-ground distribution. We needed to raise money from people in the U.S., so that made sense. But there are so many challenges that come with that, especially with FDI laws and everything like that, that if you don't have to register an international company as well, don't do it.
About 3 weeks in India to register your company, get a DIN number, set up a bank account, get 2 directors. It's a very streamlined process.
You can multiply that by 400 if you have a US company.
I'm going to take a quick comment from Anurag, and then we'll have 2 more questions, and I think we should wrap up after the anybody tracking?
I think we have just one more question. The next keynote is going to start in about 5 minutes, so maybe.
Okay, so comment. We'll get 2 questions.
Try to reduce the number of variables that you are taking up when you start a new venture. You may be comfortable with the location, comfortable with the group of people. Field is fine. If the field is new place, new group of people, new investors, that much harder. So just reduce the number of variables. It is not about risk taking, it is about risk mitigation. That is one. Other is, do not trust anybody on this panel in my view. On registration, go to an expert. They would tell you the right things for optimizing taxation, because that has a huge impact on this. When you go to Mauritius, you go to Bahamas, whatever. And US investors do not want to invest unless you are protected, you are gained from, from Bahamas.
Sometimes you can't trust the experts if they won't speak on 2 countries at the same time.
Okay, 2 questions quickly and we can wrap up.
That's why I don't want to get into the camera myself.
So in India, I agree with Pankaj. It's a very streamlined process. You can get your tax number business registered very simply. In the US or anywhere else, if you have a US entity, you've got to be concerned about where your IT is. That investors are going to be concerned about that. So you need to be sure where the IP resides in the application. And there's really no issues with that. But the one thing, if you are selling into India, and I'm just dealing with 2 clients, one in India, one in Pakistan. If you're getting paid out of India or Pakistan, you will need a PAN number in India. In Pakistan, I've just been told that they don't need it. In India, you will need a PAN number, otherwise you're going to have to pay a higher rate of tax. Otherwise you get a 300. So we can talk about that.
Okay, Hasan, you want to go? One final question and we'll wrap up after that.
How much it is easy for first generation entrepreneurs to raise capital and technical
Service-based businesses are always tough to raise capital, right? Because essentially, depending on what the service is, if it's people-driven, those people are your assets and they're walking out the door every day. Second reason why services businesses struggle to raise capital is lack of visibility in future streams. So very difficult to get, investors want to see repeatability of business and essentially visibility on revenue streams. So irrespective of where you launch a service business, to raise traditional VC or seed capital for services businesses. So that, again, going to the point, if you can find a family, and I don't know how I feel about the real estate and the liquor barons of India, and having those guys on the board of your company, if you can find the right kind of family office, it might be a better source of capital.
But it is available to all. Once you have proven that you can bring in $40 million, $80 million a year, then they will put in money. And then you can scale.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you everyone. I hope there are many more